the health and well-being and the safety of Black women is a very important thing, and that does need to be highlighted.
Yes.
And it also needs to be addressed because it is a very serious issue, not just in America, but globally. Mm-hmm. But again, what happens is that conversation could be a very helpful and a very fruitful conversation, a very productive conversation. But what happens is the people who have control of that conversation are working through their own bitterness and their own personal trauma. Yeah. And instead of being honest about that, they're taking that individual trauma and they're projecting it onto Black men. And that's not necessarily the case. There are a very small number of Black men who are toxic in the community, and they do need to be dealt with. And they also need to be, if they can be treated, fine. If they need to be dealt with by the system, then that needs to happen too. But that's a very small number of Black men. What they do is they take the small number of Black men who are toxic and can be harmful and use that to paint a broad brush around all of us. And that's what I think is dangerous. Now to answer your other question, I think the idea of Black androcide, I think it does overpower the conversation about Black femicide, but it's only because it happens so much more often than what happens to Black women. That's just the truth. If you look at the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but I'll pull them in a minute. When you look at quality of life rates, when you look at life expectancy, when you look at life outcomes when it comes to Black men and Black women are at the bottom of every socioeconomic metric, but Black men are at the bottom of that metric. And that doesn't get talked about because this country has never really cared about the well-being of Black men outside of what we can do with our physical labor. That's just the truth. And unfortunately, that translates over into our personal relationships with some of our Black women. It definitely translates into how we are looked at in the academy and even in the social programs that we are supposed to benefit Black people, but they really don't. So it's just a cycle that happens that we've bought into, and that's why you see that happen.
Interesting. So I think I went over this a few weeks ago. If I'm not mistaken, if you just look at the CDC, they show like the top, they kind of break down by group, by gender, the top killers, and top 10 Black women homicide didn't rank anywhere in the top 10. For Black men, I think number 4, if I'm not mistaken, was homicide, according to the CDC. I covered this off in a live a few weeks ago. And again, because I was really interested in this topic and I'm still doing my research, but when I started to hear the talk of Black femicide and the reason behind it or the story behind it, that's when I started to get concerned. Again, to your point, the untimely death of anybody, I think, should be taken seriously. And we really need to be honest about what's causing those different things. But, blanketly blaming an entire group of men for something that majority of them don't do, I think it just downright gets into propaganda, and that's incredibly dangerous. And so that's one of the reasons I started to take interest in that, because I've seen it be a popular talking point to push misandrous messages, and I just don't think that's helpful, or even that's dishonest. If you really do want to get to the root problem, that's not the way to do it. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, I want to say that these issues are serious issues that need to be dealt with, but it's the absolute worst people who are leading this conversation. I'm not going to say any names, at least not right now. I might later, but I don't know. But there's depends on how I feel. There's people, the people who have control of this conversation, like I said, are people who are already connected to media spaces and they're connected to academia. So they already have a built-in soapbox when they say these things that will automatically push this stuff out and promote these things for them. And there's also the fact that, Black women overwhelmingly outnumber Black men in academia and in, places like, mainstream media spaces like CNN and like MSNBC and a lot of places that get a lot of funding. So those are the narratives that you get, and those are the narratives that go out into the wider world. And because people who don't know Black culture are afraid to push back against some of these narratives because they don't want to get either canceled or they don't want to get pushed back because they feel like they're attacking a Black woman or a Black man who goes along with that, nobody says anything. And that's what makes it dangerous, There's room for these conversations, but they just need to be opened up.
So you're saying people will get into positions of power, presumably Black people will get in positions of power and push these misandrous messages, and because maybe other cultures, they're not as familiar with Black culture or they don't want to be ratioed or blacklisted, they just won't say anything. They'll just kind of let those people do their thing because they're like, this is out of my wheelhouse. I'm just going to let you kind of run and handle it.